Greetings, and welcome to our exploration of one of history's most intriguing and controversial figures, Michel de Nostredame, better known to us as Nostradamus. Born in December 1503 in Saint-Rémy de Provence, this French astrologer, physician, and alleged seer has captivated the imagination of people for centuries. His name has become synonymous with prophecy, and his work continues to be debated and analysed to this day. But who was the man behind the myth? What drove him to write his cryptic quatrains, and how did he come to be regarded as one of history's greatest prophets? Today, we'll delve into the life, works and legacy of Nostradamus, separating fact from fiction and examining the enduring fascination with his predictions. As we embark on this journey, it's crucial to approach the subject of Nostradamus with a critical eye. While his supporters claim he accurately predicted major world events, from the Great Fire of London to the rise of Adolf Hitler, academic sources reject the notion that he possessed genuine supernatural prophetic abilities. They argue that the associations made between world events and Nostradamus' quatrains are often the result of misinterpretations or mistranslations. Nevertheless, the allure of his prophecies persists, and his influence on popular culture remains significant. So let's peel back the layers of myth and examine the man behind the legend, his methods, and the historical context that shaped his work. To understand Nostradamus, we must first examine his origins. Born Michel de Nostredame, he came from a family with a fascinating religious background. His paternal great-grandfather, Cresquas, was a Jewish grain dealer in Avignon who converted to Catholicism around 1459 to 1460. This conversion was a significant event, marked by the adoption of the Christian name Pierre and the surname Nostradame, meaning Our Lady. It's a poignant reminder of the religious tensions and forced conversions that were not uncommon in Europe at the time. The family's Jewish heritage, though officially left behind, likely continued to influence their worldview and perhaps even Nostradamus' later works. Growing up in a family of converted Jews during this period would have exposed young Michel to a unique blend of cultural and religious influences. The memory of their Jewish heritage, combined with their new Catholic faith, may have fostered in him a broader, more inclusive worldview. This background could have contributed to his later interest in various esoteric traditions and his willingness to draw from diverse sources in his work. It's worth noting that despite his family's conversion, Nostradamus never shied away from using Judaic sources in his writings, a fact that speaks to the complex religious landscape of 16th century Europe. Nostradamus' early education is shrouded in some mystery. There's a persistent tradition that he was educated by his maternal great-grandfather, Jean de Saint-Rémy. However, this claim is somewhat undermined by historical records, which show that Jean de Saint-Rémy disappears from the historical record after 1504, when Nostradamus was only 1 year old. This discrepancy highlights the challenges we face when trying to separate fact from legend in Nostradamus' biography. Many details of his early life have been embellished or invented by later commentators, eager to build up the mystique of the great prophet. As a historian, I find it crucial to approach these claims with skepticism, always seeking corroborating evidence from contemporary sources. Little else is known about his childhood, although there is a persistent tradition that he was educated by his maternal great-grandfather, Jean de Saint-Rémy, a tradition which is somewhat undermined by the fact that the latter disappears from the historical record after 1504 when the child was only 1 year old. At the age of 14, Nostradamus embarked on his formal education at the University of Avignon. This was a significant step for a young man of his background, offering him access to the world of Renaissance scholarship. However, his time at Avignon was cut short after just over a year when the university closed due to an outbreak of the plague. This early brush with the devastating disease would have a profound impact on Nostradamus' life and career. The plague was a constant threat in 16th century Europe, and its impact on society cannot be overstated. For Nostradamus, it would become both a professional challenge and a personal tragedy. Following his departure from Avignon, Nostradamus claims to have spent 8 years travelling the countryside, researching herbal remedies. This period of his life is particularly intriguing to me. The 16th century saw a renewed interest in botany and herbal medicine. partly driven by the rediscovery of classical texts and partly by the need to find new treatments for diseases like the plague. Nostradamus' travels would have exposed him to a wide range of folk remedies and local medical traditions. This practical experience, combined with his later formal medical training, would form the foundation of his medical career. It's worth noting that this blend of formal education and practical experience was not uncommon for physicians of the time, but it does highlight Nostradamus' curiosity and his willingness to learn from diverse sources. In 1529, Nostradamus entered the University of Montpellier to study for a doctorate in medicine. However, his time there was short-lived. He was expelled shortly after enrolling when it was discovered that he had been an apothecary, a manual trade expressly banned by university statutes. This expulsion is a fascinating insight into the rigid social and professional hierarchies of the time. Medicine was considered a learned profession, distinct from the more practical trades like apothecary. Nostradamus' attempt to bridge this divide and the university's swift rejection of him speaks volumes about the social and intellectual climate of the period. Despite this setback, Nostradamus continued to work, presumably still as an apothecary, and became famous for creating a rose pill that purportedly protected against the plague. He was expelled shortly afterwards by the student procurator Guillaume Rondelet, when it was discovered that he had been an apothecary, a manual trade, expressly banned by the university statutes, and had been slandering doctors. Nostradamus' medical career is a fascinating aspect of his life that often gets overshadowed by his prophetic works. In 1545, he assisted the prominent physician Louis Seer in fighting a major plague outbreak in Marseille. This was a pivotal moment in his career, establishing him as a respected medical practitioner. The plague was the most feared disease of the time, and those who were willing to treat its victims were often regarded with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Nostradamus' willingness to put himself at risk to help others speaks to his character and his commitment to his medical vocation. Following his work in Marseille, Nostradamus went on to tackle further outbreaks of disease on his own in Salon de Provence and Aix-en-Provence. His methods for treating the plague are described in his Traité de Fardement, which was essentially a medical cookbook. One of the treatments he used was bloodletting, a common practice at the time, but one that we now know was ineffective and often harmful. It's important to remember that despite his later reputation as a prophet, Nostradamus was very much a man of his time when it came to medical practices. His treatments, while advanced for the 16th century, were based on the flawed medical understanding of the era. Interestingly, the same book that described his plague treatments also contained instructions for preparing cosmetics. This combination of medical and cosmetic recipes was not unusual for the time, but it does highlight the broad range of Nostradamus' interests and expertise. It also reflects the blurred lines between medicine, cosmetics, and what we might today call alternative therapies in 16th century Europe. Nostradamus' work in this area shows him to be a practical man, concerned with both health and appearance, and willing to draw on a wide range of traditions and techniques in his practice. He then began his project of writing a book of 1,000 mainly French quatrains, which constitute the largely undated prophecies for which he is most famous today. Nostradamus' transition from physician to prophet is one of the most intriguing aspects of his life. Following another visit to Italy, he began to move away from medicine and toward what was then called the occult. This shift wasn't as dramatic as it might seem to us today. In the Renaissance period, the lines between science, medicine, and what we now consider pseudoscience were much less clearly defined. Astrology, for instance, was considered a legitimate field of study, often taught alongside astronomy in universities. Nostradamus' interest in prophecy and astrology was very much in keeping with the intellectual climate of his time. In 1550, following popular trends, Nostradamus wrote his first almanac. The success of this venture encouraged him to write one or more annually. These almanacs contained a staggering number of prophecies, at least 6,338 by some counts. It's important to note that almanacs were extremely popular publications in the 16th century. They combined astrological predictions with practical information on weather, agriculture, and other matters of daily life. Nostradamus' almanacs would have reached a wide audience, establishing his reputation as a seer long before the publication of his more famous work, Les Prophéties. The success of his almanacs led to Nostradamus receiving requests for horoscopes and psychic advice from nobility and other prominent people. This was a common practice at the time, with astrologers often serving as advisors to the powerful. However, it's worth noting that Nostradamus' approach to astrology was somewhat unorthodox. He generally expected his clients to supply their own birth charts, rather than calculating them himself as a professional astrologer would have done. When obliged to attempt this himself, he frequently made errors and failed to adjust the figures for his client's place or time of birth. This suggests that Nostradamus was perhaps more interested in the interpretative aspects of astrology than in its technical details. Feeling vulnerable to opposition on religious grounds, he devised a method of obscuring his meaning by using Virgilianized syntax, word games, and a mixture of other languages such as Greek, Italian, Latin, and Provençal. Nostradamus' most famous work, Les Prophéties, was first published in 1555. This book, containing 942 poetic quatrains, would cement his reputation as a prophet and continue to fascinate readers for centuries to come. The quatrains are notably vague and open to interpretation, a characteristic that has both fueled their longevity and drawn criticism. Nostradamus himself was aware of the potential controversy his work might cause. Feeling vulnerable to opposition on religious grounds, he devised a method of obscuring his meaning by using what he called Virgilianized syntax, word games, and a mixture of languages including Greek, Italian, Latin, and Provençal. The reception of Les Prophéties was mixed from the start. Some people thought Nostradamus was a servant of evil, a fake, or simply insane. Others, particularly among the elite, were fascinated by his work. One of his greatest admirers was Catherine de' Medici, wife of King Henry II of France. After reading his almanacs for 1555, which hinted at unnamed threats to the royal family, she summoned him to Paris to explain them and to draw up horoscopes for her children. This royal patronage was crucial in establishing Nostradamus' reputation and protecting him from potential persecution. It's worth noting that neither prophecy nor astrology fell under the jurisdiction of the Inquisition at the time. Nostradamus would have been in danger only if he had practiced magic to support his predictions. This is an important point, as it highlights the complex relationship between science, religion, and what we might now call the occult in 16th century Europe. Nostradamus was operating in a grey area, pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable without quite crossing the line into heresy. His brief imprisonment at Marignan in late 1561 was solely because he had violated a recent royal decree by publishing his 1562 almanac without the prior permission of a bishop, not because of the content of his prophecies. You will not find me alive at sunrise. The legacy of Nostradamus is a complex and contentious one. Since his death, only the prophecies have continued to be popular, but they have been extraordinarily so. Over 200 editions have appeared, along with over 2,000 commentaries. The persistence of Nostradamus in popular culture seems to be partly due to the vagueness and lack of dating in his quatrains, which makes it easy to quote them selectively after major dramatic events and retrospectively claim them as hits. This has led to Nostradamus being credited with predicting everything from the Great Fire of London to the September 11th attacks. However, academic sources reject the notion that Nostradamus had any genuine supernatural prophetic abilities. They argue that the associations made between world events and Nostradamus' quatrains are the result of misinterpretations or mistranslations. Critics point out that his predictions are characteristically vague, meaning they could be applied to virtually anything, and are useless for determining whether their author had any real prophetic powers. As a historian, I find this critique compelling. The power of hindsight and the human tendency to find patterns and meaning can lead to seemingly impressive predictions being identified in vague texts. It's also worth noting that much of Nostradamus' prophetic work appears to paraphrase collections of ancient end-of-the-world prophecies, mainly Bible-based, supplemented with references to historical events and anthologies of omen reports. He then projected these into the future, in part with the aid of comparative horoscopy. This method explains the many predictions involving ancient figures such as Sulla, Gaius Marius and Nero, as well as his descriptions of battles in the clouds and frogs falling from the sky. Understanding Nostradamus' methods and sources doesn't diminish the poetic power of his work, but it does place it firmly in the context of Renaissance scholarship and mysticism, rather than genuine prophecy. Although my son, I have used the word prophet, I would not attribute to myself a title of such lofty sublimity. The influence of Nostradamus extends far beyond the realm of prophecy and into popular culture. His life and works have been the subject of numerous books, films, and television programs. This enduring fascination is a testament to the power of mystery and the human desire to glimpse the future. However, it's important to approach these popular depictions with a critical eye. Many of them perpetuate myths and inaccuracies about Nostradamus' life and abilities that have no basis in historical fact. One particularly troubling aspect of Nostradamus' legacy is its exploitation for political purposes. During World War II, for example, both Allied and Axis powers used supposed Nostradamus prophecies as propaganda. The Nazis allegedly went so far as to drop leaflets containing fake Nostradamus quatrains on French troops, predicting German victory. This manipulation of Nostradamus' work for political ends is a stark reminder of the power of prophecy, real or imagined, to influence public opinion. It's a practice that continues to this day, with Nostradamus' quatrains being invoked to support various political and ideological positions. Despite the skepticism of scholars, Nostradamus continues to captivate the public imagination. His name has become synonymous with prophecy, and his work is still consulted by those seeking insight into future events. This enduring fascination says as much about human nature as it does about Nostradamus himself. Our desire to know the future, to find meaning in chaos, and to believe in extraordinary abilities all play a role in the Nostradamus phenomenon. As we look back on his life and legacy, perhaps the most valuable lesson we can draw is not about the future, but about ourselves and our enduring quest for understanding in an uncertain world. Not that I'm foolish enough to claim to be a prophet. As we conclude our exploration of Nostradamus, we're left with a figure who defies easy categorization. He was a man of his time, deeply influenced by the Renaissance fusion of science, mysticism, and classical learning. Yet he also transcended his era, creating a body of work that continues to resonate with people centuries after his death. Whether we view him as a genuine prophet, a skilled poet, or a clever charlatan, there's no denying the impact he's had on Western culture. Perhaps the most valuable aspect of studying Nostradamus is not in trying to decipher his prophecies, but in what his enduring popularity reveals about human nature. Our fascination with Nostradamus speaks to our desire for certainty in an uncertain world, our hope that the future can be known and perhaps even changed. It also highlights our tendency to find patterns and meaning, even in the most ambiguous of texts. As we face our own uncertain future, the story of Nostradamus reminds us of the power of mystery, the allure of prophecy, and the enduring human quest for understanding. In the end, whether we believe in Nostradamus' prophetic abilities or not, his legacy encourages us to look both backwards and forwards, to consider our place in the grand sweep of history, and to ponder what the future might hold. And in doing so, we engage in a practice as old as humanity itself, the attempt to make sense of our world and our place within it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life and legacy of Nostradamus. I hope you found it as fascinating as I have. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support truly does make a difference. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking understanding. Not that I would attribute to myself either the name or the role of a prophet.